Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We are transforming rigorous university exam papers into a dynamic masterclass. We're essentially stripping away all the fluff and looking directly at what top academic institutions demand their students know about literally the most critical subject of our time, the survival of our planet. So get ready, because this is the ultimate crash course in environmental science.
Okay, let's just dive right into this. The source material for our journey today comes straight from the examination halls of the Maulana Abul Kalam Azad University of Technology in West Bengal. We are extracting the absolute core curriculum directly from 3 years of their rigorous environmental science exams. By looking at exactly what these professors are testing, we're going to build a rock-solid understanding of environmental fundamentals.
So here is our syllabus-style roadmap for today. 1. Earth systems and cycles. 2. Defining air and water pollution. 3. Global warming and climate change. 4. Managing our solid waste. And 5. Policy and sustainable development.
All right, Section 1, Earth systems and cycles.
To truly grasp environmental science, we can't just start with the problems. We first need to understand the baseline of our planet's incredible natural engine. In the Group A rapid-fire sections of these exams, students are constantly grilled on these absolute basics. An ecosystem is built on this really delicate balance. You have your abiotic components, so these are the non-living elements, like the solid rock of the lithosphere and the water of the hydrosphere. And then you have your biotic, or living components. Together, they form the study of ecology, which is actually a term derived from Greek. Now, these components aren't just, vocabulary words to memorize. They are the literal foundation of every single ecological pyramid on Earth. And these living and non-living components, they're constantly interacting through biogeochemical cycles. The exams actually repeatedly ask students to draw these out. Why? Because the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus cycles illustrate exactly how the Earth recycles life's essential building blocks. It's like nature's ultimate recycling program. Nothing is ever truly lost in a healthy natural system. Nutrients just shift from the atmosphere into the soil, into living organisms, and then right back again.
Moving on to Section 2, Defining air and water pollution.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this is where the inciting incident of our story happens: human disruption. We take those perfect natural cycles we just talked about and we overload them. When we look at water pollution, the exams heavily test 3 specific acronyms, and translating this academic jargon is absolutely crucial. First up is DO, or dissolved oxygen. This is the good stuff, the essential oxygen available in the water for fish and aquatic life to literally breathe. But when we dump waste into water, bacteria swarm in to eat that waste, and in the process, they consume the oxygen. That's your BOD, Biochemical Oxygen Demand. Basically, if the BOD goes up, the DO goes down, and the river essentially suffocates. Finally, there's COD, Chemical Oxygen Demand, which measures the total oxygen required to chemically burn up all the organic pollutants. Understanding the relationship between these 3 is the ultimate key to measuring water quality.
But water pollution isn't just about oxygen levels. The 2023 exam highlights a highly specific, localized threat: arsenic contamination in groundwater aquifers. This brilliantly shows how these sort of abstract pollution concepts apply to real-world geography and cause severe human health crises, specifically for multiple exposed districts in West Bengal. It's a stark reminder that at the end of the day, environmental science is really about human survival. Okay, shifting our focus to the sky, students are asked to contrast atmospheric concepts. You have the ambient lapse rate, which is really just the natural way air cools as you go higher up, versus the abiotic lapse rate, which measures how a specific moving pocket of air changes temperature. Now, why does this matter? Well, because these invisible temperature dynamics literally dictate whether smog and dangerous air pollutants get trapped directly over a city or blown away safely. And hey, speaking of invisible pollutants, the exams also heavily weigh how we measure things like equivalent noise levels, really probing into exactly how noise pollution physically damages human hearing mechanisms.
All right, Section 3, Global warming and climate change.
Let's move from regional pollution to the macro-level environmental breakdowns. This is the territory that completely dominates the high-stakes, long-answer sections of these sorts exams. So the crucial point here is understanding the actual mechanics of the greenhouse effect. The exam specifically wants students to distinguish between radiation types. Look, the sun sends us short-wave radiation, which passes right through our atmosphere to warm the Earth. Simple enough, right?
But when the Earth tries to bounce that heat back into space, it radiates as long-wave radiation. Greenhouse gases essentially act like a giant blanket, trapping that long-wave radiation. This is the fundamental physical mechanism driving global warming and devastating our terrestrial ecosystems.
But what is actually driving those greenhouse gases? Well, it's us. The 2023 paper includes this staggering math problem. If the world population is exactly 8 billion people, what will it be in just 25 years at a 1% annual growth rate? This exponential growth equation isn't just some abstract math test, it is the absolute heartbeat of environmental strain.
Let's see how this builds into deeper demographic tools. Because to really understand population pressures, the syllabus requires mastering concepts like total fertility rate, total mortality rate, and drawing age pyramids. Imagine a pyramid with a wide base. That means you have a massive youth population that will inevitably grow up and consume more. Understanding these demographic tools is so vital because every single new person adds pressure to the planet's finite and renewable resources.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Managing Our Solid Waste.
With billions of people consuming resources, we inevitably generate a massive amount of physical byproducts. This brings us to the solutions half of our explainer, how we actually manage this giant mess. The exams frequently ask, what is anthropogenic environmental degradation? Well, anthropogenic simply means human-generated. Unlike a tree falling in a forest, which nature just seamlessly recycles, anthropogenic waste consists of things like synthetic plastics, electronics, and industrial sludges. Nature's biogeochemical cycles simply cannot break this stuff down, and that sets up the urgent, undeniable need for engineered waste management.
So students must outline the essential solid waste management strategies and, crucially, their inherent trade-offs. I mean, you can bury it in a landfill, which is cheap, sure, but it runs the risk of leaking toxins into the soil. Or you can burn it in an incineration plant, which reduces the physical volume but generates potentially dangerous atmospheric gases. There is no magic eraser in environmental science, guys. Every disposal method is a calculated compromise.
And finally, Section 5, Policy and Sustainable Development.
So if the problems are this massive, and the physical solutions are full of all these trade-offs, how do we actually fix this system? We enter our final act here, the legal frameworks and the overarching philosophies designed to enforce real change. Across multiple years of these exams, one piece of legislation is basically treated as gospel, the Environment Protection Act of 1986. This act is heavily tested because it is the legal backbone authorizing the central government of India to intervene, to regulate pollutants, and to actively protect the environmental quality we've been discussing this whole time. Because let's be honest, without policy with teeth, science is really just observation.
And this brilliantly illustrates how that policy takes action in the real world. The Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA. The 2025 paper actually asked students to map this out via a flowchart. Before a dam, a factory, or a new highway is ever built, an EIA has to objectively identify the environmental impacts, propose clear strategies to mitigate that damage, and then present this data to the decision makers. It is literally the ultimate tool to ensure that economic progress doesn't come at the cost of total ecological collapse.
Which brings us to the ultimate goal of the entire curriculum, anchored by this really powerful concept from the source material. Sustainable growth is considered the modern concept of development. This is the whole point. Environmental science isn't about stopping human progress or turning back the clock. It's about finding that delicate scientific balance where human interaction and environmental preservation can actually coexist indefinitely. We've journeyed all the way from the absolute basics of ecology, straight through the math of population and pollution, all the way to the legal frameworks of sustainability. So, I want to leave you with this thought. If you were sitting in that exam hall today, armed with this knowledge, would you be ready to pass the test of protecting our planet in your own daily life? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.